Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name's Matt Lehman, and we work on Django apps here on the stream. And I'm going to continue on my project that I've got going for my family. It's a homeschool application. We're going to work on that tonight. I have been working on some changes to introduce customer-facing documentation into my site. And I've been going through the process of setting up the documentation in the scheme that I want to use. And working on the bits that will actually incorporate it here. So that's what we'll focus our attention on today is I've done a couple parts of that, so we have something to work with, and we need to do a little bit extra to really polish it off and get it embedded into the application. So you're free to ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development. That's what I'm here for. And we'll get started. I do want to let you know that there are plenty of ways you can keep up with me if you want to. I have a website at mattlehman.com. It's linked above. And I'm generally MB Lehman on the internet. So you can find me on GitHub, as you can see here. I'm also on Twitter as MB Lehman. And if you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out there, you can contribute on Patreon as well and become a patron. And I'm at patreon.com/MB Lehman there too. Finally, there's a Discord link that's below, so if you have questions that don't fit into a tweet that you want to ask me about, feel free to do that. So let's think about what this documentation is, or let me show it off a little bit, and then we'll make sense of what's going on here. So I have a new set of documentation that I've been generating, and I'm using Sphinx. So here's a question for you. Have you ever used Sphinx, which is Python's documentation tool? That's what I'm using for this project. And Sphinx is pretty cool because it lets you control your documentation in a repository, which is what I'm doing. I'm going to add my documentation to Git, so I don't have to worry about managing a database or extra servers or anything. All of it is going to be generated in static files that will appear on a website. So to work with Sphinx, there are a variety of tools, and I've got one. It's some make files that have some commands that Sphinx uses, and I can build it here. And you can actually notice, so I'm currently in the root directory of my project, and I created a docs directory. So if you're not familiar with make files, it's possible to change the directory that the make program is in, and then run make commands there, make targets as they're called. And make files are just a very old way to run commands that you want to like script and keep track of. It was often used for compilation tools, like if you're compiling a C program or something like that, it would be very commonly used there. So it's a tool that's been around for an extremely long time, and it's still useful today. So there's a make file that is incorporated with Sphinx when you run through its generator process to build the documentation. And so what I've got here is I'm telling the make command to change into the docs directory. That's what the -C does. And then execute the HTML target, which is something from Sphinx to say build the HTML version of this documentation. And so now that we have that, we can actually go into that directory. And there's a build directory where the output is stored, and it's in this HTML directory. And I'm going to start up a web server here. So we're going to do Python 3 m HTTP server, and we won't have to do this long term. This is just so you can see it right now. And we'll go to that page and check it out. So it's on port 8000. So if I open up port 8000, we're going to find my documentation so far. So I guess I should pause and explain what is my homeschool website doing with documentation when I don't really have a lot of customers that are asking me questions yet. So what's the goal here? Part of what I'm planning to do with this project is to compare my tool to different online homeschool planners that are out there. I want to give people an opportunity to see what other planners offer and see what Schooldesk offers and figure out what's the right choice for them. Because I recognize fully that the software as a service that I'm building is not going to be for everybody. But I want to present it to people in the best light, not to be like super biased, but just say like, here's what I've seen from these other tools, and here's what I can say that Schooldesk does. So it's kind of a way to sell of like why Schooldesk, but at the same time be as fair as I can be, because I think people will appreciate fairness and honesty. So what I've got here is just enough documentation to show that this will ultimately have more information in it too. But for the moment, one of the tools that it's going to compare against is a tool called CM Organizer. So there's no content in here yet. I just needed enough of a page to start styling it. So I'm using Sphinx, as I said. You can learn more about Sphinx from the website, sphinxdoc.org. But you might notice, and I'm sure you've seen Sphinx before. In fact, I'll bring up one of my projects that is completely unrelated to Django. It's actually, I won't even get into the details of it, but you can just see the look and feel of it. So readthedocs.io, which if you've done any amount of Python development, you've probably encountered some documentations from Read the Docs, is a very commonly used tool in the ecosystem. And the way that a lot of the documentation that's built for Python projects is using Sphinx. You may have not known it by name, but now you do. Another one that Read the Docs works with is something called mkdocs, which uses Markdown. But if you go to python.org, that's powered by Sphinx. So Sphinx has been around for quite a long time and is a pretty robust and rich documentation tool. So let me answer like why use Sphinx. So aside from it generating static files, Sphinx I find is valuable because you can do things that you can't do with Markdown. I could totally have made another Hugo site, another statically generated site, and put all my content into some Markdown files and do all of that kind of stuff. But Sphinx is good about tracking links between portions of the site. So for example, if I wanted to link from this root page on this Tappy project over to Tappy consumers, it's possible for me to do that in such a way that Sphinx can monitor that that link is right. So let's say, for example, I decide to delete the Tap consumers section. In a regular Markdown file, there's no like semantic analysis of any links. So if you deleted something and just pushed it out and had things that still link to it somewhere else, those pages suddenly become a 404 link. It will be a resource that's not found. With Sphinx, which is a hard word for me to say, it seems, with Sphinx, that problem is not an issue because you reference it in a certain way that as it builds documentation, it will say, hey, wait a minute, you had a link over here and now that page isn't there, so I'm not going to finish compiling because you broke it. So it forces a level of correctness, which is beneficial because it means the end result will not have missing pages that are going to cause problems for your actual users. So I find it really valuable. There's also tons of other stuff that Sphinx can do, like footnotes and cross-linking and callouts, and it just has more richness to it than Markdown, which is why it's a good project. So there's the information about Sphinx here, but I've used it in combination with, this might look familiar because this is the actual Read the Docs theme. But what I've done is I have customized it with the blue for my own branding color. So the blue here is a slightly darker blue compared to Read the Docs. Although now I'm looking at this, it's got this lighter blue here. So maybe we can spend a minute to see if there is an option to change that color, because I would like it to be the same. And it's kind of a bummer that it's not. So let's poke at that for a minute. Let's go to Sphinx. The other name of the package is Sphinx RTD theme. And this is something that you can install via pip. So pip install Sphinx-RTD-theme. And here's the configuration for it. So I've already changed the style nav header background. That's what that darker blue was. And I'm wondering if there's one to change the color for these actual like call out sections here. And I'm not seeing anything. There's not a ton of styling options, which isn't a bad thing. Like it lets you relinquish a lot of your controls over to the design. Okay, I'm not going to spend a ton of time looking at that. But what's my vision here? This is, again, another thing that I want to live at my website, and I don't want to put it on a separate subdomain. So if you've joined in a previous stream, you've seen that I made my blog for my website live at a path on my domain. And because I did that, I had to hook it into my Django application so that it knew where those files were. And we're going to do some of that tonight. So we've talked about what Sphinx is and a little bit about how it was customized. So now let's move on to the next item here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to hook it into my continuous integration system. And the reason to do that is to check the correctness, because I am most likely not going to be changing things, but if I ever update Sphinx and it changes something, I want to make sure that my documentation builds properly all the time. It will also be good because it will run every time I want to do a deploy. And so if I can catch it whenever I commit before it gets to deployment, then that's going to be a benefit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the GitHub file. So I have a GitHub file for my CI stuff, and I'm just called it tests. And you can see it does a lot of Python setup here. And so it installs a bunch of packages, and it runs commands to check the type information. It runs the actual test suite. But what I need it to do here is actually try and build the documentation. So we'll give it a new task to put at the bottom, and I'm going to say name. We'll say check documentation build. And the thing that I want to run is it's another make target, as I said, and I'm going to run the same make target that you saw from the command line just a moment ago. I'm going to tell it to change directory into the docs directory. I'm going to tell it to build the HTML version of the site. And I think that's going to do it. I think that'll be everything we need to check it out. So what I'll do is I'll commit this and I'll push it up, and we'll give that a few minutes. We'll move on to the next thing, but we'll check on it in a little bit to see if GitHub Actions, where this stuff executes, it was successful or not. So let's see. That was the whole command. I think that's good. And we'll say add documentation build checking to CI. And this is issue number 267. Not in the 400s yet. And push that up. So now that should go to GitHub, and their CI machines should run that as it does with every commit. And we'll be able to check on the status when it's done. It takes 2 or 3 minutes, so I don't want to go there yet. But what's the next thing we need to do? We can say this, and we've hooked it in. You can see it's detected the commit, and it's in the process of building. That's what that yellow dot is over here. And now we're ready to add this to white noise. Let me introduce you, if you haven't seen it before, how I connected all this, how I connected static files to white noise for files that are not part of Django's normal static files scheme. So I have a special middleware that I've made that will load in additional files into the middleware system, so that that white noise, which is the tool that you can add to Django to serve static files directly from the application, can do that. And I've got it down to a configuration here. So that's what we need to go change, is go to the settings file, which is under my project area, and go to more white noise where I have it. And the thing that we need to add is two different things. One is the actual directory of the content, and the other is the prefix that I want to put it on. So what is going to be the path when you visit the site? We'll be able to test this out, and Black had just formatted that, so we'll add a comma here and create a new entry, and now Black should keep that on 2 separate lines. So the actual output is going to be in a different path of not this blog output directory location, but it's going to be in docs, and then we want to pass it the build directory is where it's going to store that, and then underneath that, the actual content is all going to be in HTML. And I want this to live at docs. So if I did all that correctly, I should be able to start up the server. And I'll do that by running make. And that fires up my GUnicorn server. We can go to the page. And now, if everything is working properly, it's loading some static files there, so that's what it's taking time doing. If everything's working properly, I should be able to visit docs, and boom, look at that, we get dumped right to the docs, which is good. That's what we want to have happen. If that directory hadn't existed, it wouldn't have worked naturally, but the directory did exist locally, so you're able to see this. So that's a pretty trivial change, actually. I didn't realize how short that would be, but I appreciate brevity, so we can say that particular aspect is done. Although I'm now realizing that there is a thing missing here. So add to deployment. We'll get to that in a second. So now we actually need to link to the documentation, and to do that, I think I want to put this in the footer, and we'll see where it's going to fit best. So I'm going to go to, I have a footer HTML somewhere. Maybe I just kept it in the base file. Yeah, I didn't create a separate footer partial. It's just right here. And I need to put the location, and it's going to look, frankly, it's going to look a lot like this blog line, because, yeah, it's going to live next to blog. And you can see, notice something different about it is like the blog is hard coded, because I'm doing extra work to add that to middleware, and it's part of my deployment process. And Django doesn't actually know about the path, so I can't use URL to create the path. So what I need to do is something similar. I need to call it docs, and I need to give it some text. And so what I want to call this, let's say, can either say help or maybe get help might be friendlier. That might be the right way to go. Although now that I'm doing this, now that I'm talking out loud, well, let's see this version first and see how it looks. There's another aspect I'm thinking about here that I haven't really covered yet, but we'll see once we look at the app. Okay, so we're on the site, and we are able to go down here, and if I refresh the page, we should see the new link that we care about. So there's get help. It's getting a little busy down here, to be honest. A little busier than perhaps I'd like. I'm also noticing, why is that linking, but the copyright? That looks weird to me. That School Desk is linkable, but the copyright year, which seems to go with School Desk, is not part of that. I'm not sure I like that. I might clean that up over here. So there's a bunch of links down here. And the reason I'm not sure I'm liking that is because I think when we put down to mobile sizes, it's going to look, yeah, it's starting to wrap, which is not ideal. So But you know, I don't expect to have a bunch of mobile traffic, frankly. And I don't think people are going to be paying a ton of attention to the footer. So I think it's okay. So we're going to leave this here and link to docs for the moment. And while we're here, let's go ahead and clean up this weird linkage. I feel like it just the whole thing should be a link. So it's got, yeah, I even have it in the same span. So I don't know why I went with that style, but let's see how it looks when it's all linkable. Maybe I won't like it, but won't know until we try. Yeah, at least that feels, it's the whole copyright idea, and it is linking back to the top thing. So I'm going to keep that for now. Maybe I'll change it later, but it feels good enough for now. Okay, now let's talk about what else we could change this to. But before we do that, let's go check on the actual GitHub Actions and see if everything worked according to plan. So I'm jumping over to the Actions section, and you can see if you've never used GitHub Actions, it's pretty nice that GitHub gives you these CI tools for open source projects. I think there's a limit to how much build time you get available for free. But for my purposes, certainly as a single individual project, I don't even think I'm anywhere close to the number of minutes that I'm permitted for free. So if you can design a workflow and use GitHub Actions, it's a great way to check your code and make sure that it's continues to be valid. So we can look at the particular job that I've built and go to the run tests thing. And if we check down along here, you can see everything that was in that YAML file. It gets converted into one of these tasks, and we can expand it and look at it. So we're building the documentation. Did this really happen in less than a second? That is like shocking. Because I can only imagine that's why they said 0. Maybe that's the case right now. That's pretty cool. That's very fast. So if this had failed, and I don't need to prove this because, well, I'll prove it in a different way. So we have that make that runs this command, and you can look at the exit status code with by echoing $? And that should be a 0. Okay, so 0 in Unix and on the command line will mean that it's considered a success. So if I go in now and went into the actual project and looked at the index file, and let's add a page that doesn't exist. So let's add foo, okay? And now if I run the same command, we're gonna get an error because it's gonna say I can't find that page. Foo doesn't exist. And if you echo this, you'll see that it comes back with a numeric value, which means that the process exited as a failure. And so that's what CI is looking for. Anytime, the only way you could get all the way to the bottom for being green is every process has to come back and say, yeah, it worked well. So I don't feel like I need to check it and commit it because I'm very confident that's the way that GitHub CI works. And frankly, any CI, they all kind of depend on this behavior of a process exiting properly. So I'm confident that the CI portion is correct. That's nice. And where are we next? Like what is it that we can check here? I think, oh, I know. Okay. So the next thing I want to consider is this page. I might want to actually link to a real page before sending a user to docs. I might want to give them kind of a message of here's what else you can do. And the reason for that is I think I want to be able to incorporate whether to display a contact support method. I say method right now because I don't think it's going to be a form right now. A lot of sites that you can go to can have a form of contact support, and you fill out a form of your problem. But in this early stage of this project, what I'm probably going to do is create an email forwarding address. that I can share with my users that'll end up somewhere that I can access it later. But I don't want that to just be an email address that's just widely available on the open internet. So I want to protect that chunk of code with, or that email address with some template logic that says only show this if you're authenticated, which means you're logged in and you're actually a user and may be really in need of support. So that makes me want to change this link from, instead of being docs, I might change it to help or support. I'm not really. Yeah, let's look at, what does GitHub do? They've got some reasonable patterns. They have, there it is. They call it help, and they send you to docs. Okay, well, not quite the same as I was going for, but at least we're in the same vein, I guess. So I do like the simpler name of help instead of get help feels nice, because otherwise, another way of viewing get help is it's an imperative, so I'm telling you to get help, which people might not appreciate. So let's do this. Let's call it help as just a simpler way of asking for it. And let's create a new view. So we're going to go to, I've got a lot of my basic views here, my about page, my terms of service page, the privacy page. It's going to be a simple page like that. And you can see I'm putting them all in the core app. So let's go over to the core area and go to the views file. And let's go down to that section, which I thought was in here. Oh, hold on. I could have sworn it was in here. Terms? Well, shoot, where are you? Terms. Oh, you know what it might be? They might not even, they don't even need to be called out as a view here. I think I might have just plugged it into the URLs file. Yeah, here they are. It's just a template view. There's nothing fancy about it. So I didn't even make a proper view for it. I did write a test for it though. So let's go over there. So let's go to test and test views. That's what we want. So core test views, and let's put the split there. Close it off. So really I want to just check that the page loads okay. And we should write a couple of tests here. We should write that authenticated users get to see the email address and unauthenticated users don't. Yeah, that's my plan. So we'll call this new test case, if I could type, we'll call it test help, because that's going to be the view. It's the help view. And we do want to just check that it's okay. But we also want to assert something. We want to assert that the email address is not in the just standard view. So that's one thing to add here. So we'll do an assert. This address I'll probably keep as a setting on the project. So we'll have to add a setting. And we want to say, there's a way to get the response too. So let's go to look at the test tools. We're going to check that something is in the response. Yeah, here we go. Assert response contains is a helper method that we've got here. And let's check on it. We might not even have to give it the response. I think we can just do, yeah, there we go. So instead of using PyTest, we're going to use the test plus. assert response contains. And I'm going to, this setting doesn't exist yet, but I'm going to say, pretend it does. So we're going to call it the support email. Like that. And yeah. So in order to actually verify this, we need to do a couple of things. We need to import settings. So that's going to be in Django. So from Django conf import settings, like that. So that makes the settings module available. But if we run this test, there's going to be a couple of things that fail. We haven't created the help view yet. So it's not going to be able to do the URL lookup. It can't find that. So we need to add help. And I'm going to put this after privacy, I guess. We'll say help. And it's going to give this, we'll give it the template of help and the name of help. And try and rerun the test. And it's going to fail again. This time it's going to fail because it can't find the template file, because that temp file doesn't exist yet. So we're done with the URLs file now. We now have our new view, so we can leave that alone. And let's go to the privacy file. And let's use this view, because it's pretty close to the way that I think I want the help page to look. I want the help page to be very simple, to say, like, if you need help, you can contact such and such email address, or you can go read the documentation. Probably suggest that they do the documentation first. We'll change the title to be help. And that should be enough to make the test go, but the settings part's going to fail. So that setting doesn't exist yet, because I haven't created it yet. So now we can return to the project settings. And here's where we need to add a new setting. So all of the settings that I've been adding so far have largely been either Django settings or third-party application settings like white noise and all these other bits. And now we're adding a setting that is specific to an application that is within the project. So I'm going to put it down here, where I'm going to keep all of my own settings that I care about. And this is probably going to be hard-coded, because it's not something I need to customize right now. It's not something that even works. So you could send email to it and it's going to bounce on you. But ultimately, it should go somewhere. And so let's create that. That more white noise is for some middleware, but I kind of want to maybe have a block of settings for each Django app as I have them. So let's add one here called core, and we'll create the email or the setting. We'll call it support email. And the name I'm going to use is support. And I guess my big reveal for the week is that I bought a domain name. I haven't hooked it up yet. So the ultimate name of the application will be the schooldesk.app. So there it is. That, like I said, it hasn't been hooked up yet. So if you go there, it won't actually do the right thing. But that I will be hooking that up shortly. And the reason I haven't hooked it up yet is because Heroku, if you want to get automatic TLS, which automatic certificates to make HTTPS work, you have to move from the free tier up to the paid tier. Even on the lowest hobby paid tier, they will offer that, but not until then. And the challenge with a .app domain, and this is one of the checkboxes I clicked when I bought it, is a .app domain will not work without HTTPS. So I'm essentially forcing myself, signing myself up for a .app domain. Anyway, that's the domain, and that's why it's not hooked up. But for the moment, we have an email address that again doesn't go anywhere. You can't email me. I haven't bought mail forwarding through that, so it doesn't go there right now. Someday it will. So now if we write the test, we actually want the opposite, that it does not contain. Response does not contain the support email address, and that should finally pass. So this is an unauthenticated version of this. And then we want to do a test has support email. And we're going to give it a doc string that says the support email is available to authenticated users. All right, to do that, we need the same kind of commands, except we need to add a little bit more. We need to say, we need a user. And so we're going to say self make user. And then we're going to use the context manager of, I believe it's login. And we pass it in the user, like that. I think that's correct. Let's look for another example. It's been a while since I wrote that kind of test. Yep. So it's a context manager that calls self login, and you pass in a user. So by doing that, we now have this view as being authenticated. Okay, but this test is, hey Stupak, well, welcome back. This test is still going to fail, even if so I want the support email to appear in this help page, but if I run the test, it's going to fail because we haven't put it in there. So that shouldn't be a shock at all. And it's dawning on me now as we do this that we probably need to make a real view as well, because templates it's not like they have access to the settings that I know of. Ooh, that's a good question. Let's fire it up in debug mode and see what context is available. I don't think the settings are available to templates. It would be mega convenient if it was. I wouldn't have to write a new view. So I'm going to refresh here. Now we have the template toolbar. And we're going to go to, well, the help page isn't even wired in yet. So one thing at a time. All right, let's get a little closer. Let's go back to the base template. And where it is connected to docs, let's change this to be the URL of core help. So Stupak, how's your holiday been? You having a good time off, hopefully? Let's see, we're now refreshing. Now it's got a link to help. And yeah, this is the wrong template right now because I copied it from somewhere else, but it's going to the right page. Now, to answer the real question though, I wanted to check the context to see if the settings are in the context by some stroke of luck. Sadly, they are not. Okay, well, all right, we got to do a little bit more work. That's okay. So we're going to change. We're going to go back to where? Done with the base view. We're also done with the settings file, so we don't need that. 4 kids. Okay. Yeah, mine's been pretty good. I only have 2 in my house, so it's not quite so hectic, but Christmas for us was definitely busy. And it's one of those things, I don't know how old your kids are, but mine are at an age where it's like they get so worked up about gifts and stuff that they almost like lose their minds in some way. I love them to death, but they're definitely little crazy people sometimes. Okay, so let's go to core views. And so we have a view here that I'm going to copy. Ooh, 5 and under. Yo, yeah, crazy house indeed. I hear you, man. So now we're going to create a new view. And we're going to call it the help view. And we're going to point at the help file. Okay. And so now we can we're getting closer to do what I want to do. So that's there. Let's create a new split over here and change this help. So we no longer want to go straight to the template. Now I want to do views dot help view as view. By doing that, why is black not kicking in? Surely. Really? Huh. I thought for sure it would collapse this into that. Well, then it does. Okay, whatever. So now we have our help view. The test will still fail though. So we are back to, this test should work, the unauthenticated one, because the support email is not in there. But this test should still fail. And it should still fail because we haven't put the email into the context. So, but by creating a view, we now have positioned ourselves to add that. So we can go, we can do this. We can say def get context data, which is going to take the project's, it's coming along. So we're working on documentation here tonight, which I'm somehow getting off on this little side track of making a help page. But my spouse should be starting to use it as an actual consumer here in the next couple of weeks as we start our new school year. So yeah, getting close to getting some real feedback on a bunch of stuff. So we're adding a new context data thing that we're just overriding for now. Again, all I'm doing is putting in the methods that I want to override, but we still haven't fixed it. But here's where we need to add the data to the context. So we can say context is, and I'm going to call it, give it the name of support email. Honestly, lately I've just been doing it on stream. Although I guess well, that's not true. I did some last night, so I'm a liar. I haven't been working on it a ton because the app is like, it's ready to go for my spouse. Like part of it, the data entry side for this homeschool stuff is ready, and it's more like the execution side when the school year actually starts, that's the part that needs to be really proven out. So when I've been working this, it really hasn't been much on the code. If anything, I've been more focused on marketing, and at the beginning of the stream, I talked about how I'm going to be doing comparisons of other tools that do similar things to School Desk, and yeah, that's going to take more time. So we're going to import the settings. So we'll come up to here and we'll say from Django conf import settings. And that should put the support email into the context. But again, still not done. That's still going to fail because we haven't actually, this test is really looking at the response itself. And we can refresh over here. And once it gets going, there it goes. Once it gets going, we can see, if we look in the context, we now have the value accessible. So that's good news. So we're ready to change the actual template at this point. So the view, in my opinion, is done. The tests are done, all that really matters now is putting in the content. So I want the look and feel of this to keep the logo at the top, and we're going to change about us to, what should it say? Getting help? Maybe that's better than the imperative of get help. So I want to stick with that. And it's no longer this like letter to users. They really are here for a reason. So let's give them some short and sweet information. And what can we say? Let's tackle the stuff that makes the test work first. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in if the user is authenticated, then we want to let them see the support email address. So we'll say, if you have an issue that requires support, you can contact, and I think we can even make it an email, like a mail to, right? So let's do that. Let's say it's going to be an anchor tag. And since it's going to be an anchor tag, let's give it a class of underline so that it's obvious that it's clickable. And we'll give it an href of mail to, and then here's where we're going to insert the support email. Whoops, not. And that's the value, but they also need to see the actual name. And we'll close the anchor tag. And let's finish off the sentence with a little bit more. And we'll try to help out as soon as we can. Well, screw that. It's me. So I'm gonna take ownership of this. I'll try to help out as soon as I can. It's not like they have a support team. People need to understand it's coming from an individual person. All right, so I'm authenticated. And okay, the flow of the breaking of that looks weird because the email just happens to be towards the end of this first sentence. So that's kind of lame. So let's see if we can tighten up that copy to get it on one line. If you have an issue, I think that requires support is implied. So let's see if we can see what that does. And let's turn it into 2 sentences. Let's end that one and take away the and. Okay. Now we can get rid of what? All of this. No, let's leave 1 because I want to use that. I'm too lazy to retype the tag with all the classes. And I think I actually want to put this above the above it. That way, hopefully the inclination from people will be like, please check the documentation first. Although the documentation has very little in it, so it's I'm going to get a lot of support emails. So I guess I'll put out my theory of what I expect to happen based off of all of my research into entrepreneurship. In the early days of an app, people ask questions to the person who created the app, and the founder or whoever's the developer starts writing it down and basically translates the questions that are asked into a knowledge base, or in this case, a help documentation site, so that if these questions come up again in the future, you can start redirecting people to the documentation, which have better answers and kind of shows that you're prepared. So that's the plan. And I probably will even do that with my spouse as the first person, be like, okay, you're having an issue. Let me see if I can write it down. Of course, the real scenario that you want is like, you want your app to be so intuitive that it doesn't need much documentation. That's the ideal case, but that's not the reality. Or I should say that's not always the reality. You can still strive to make a great app, but people get confused about stuff. That's just the way of it. Let's see, what should we say? You can learn more about School Desk at the help documentation, or with. Let's see how that goes. Let's make another link here with an underline and an href. Again, this is like documentation that exists outside of the Django realm, so I need to hard code the URL, which will be docs. Drew Miller, hi, welcome. We're building a Django app. I don't think I've seen your handle before, so if you got any questions, I'm here doing web development stuff, particularly with Python and Django, and I will do my best to try and answer your questions. So we'll say help documentation. Whoa, what was I typing there? Deco men? Wow. Documentation. And close that off. True Miller, are you asking about the project I'm building right now, or are you asking about mattlehman.com? Because the answer to the former is yes. I'm sitting here typing HTML. The answer to the latter actually happens to be yes. So as well, it's a Hugo site, which is I don't hide anything. So if you want to go check out how my website is built, you're welcome to check out that repo. No, it's not Django. It's built using Hugo, which is a static site generator tool, and it gets built with every time I do a commit. Wow, what did Netlify change here? Okay, they just didn't change their dashboard's a little different, or their landing page. So I use Netlify, which is a pretty cool service that will host a static website. And so every time I push up code to my repository, Netlify will run. Well, thank you. Yeah, the reason it's so fast is because it is simple HTML files with nothing else in there. So I did put quite a bit of effort into trying to make it fast. So I appreciate that. But yeah, those two tools are great to make quick, snappy websites. So definitely recommend them. Although I'm sure you can definitely make a fast site with Django too. But I just don't need, for my personal stuff, I don't need something as dynamic as what Django can do. Okay, so we've got the second paragraph that says that you can go to the help documentation, and let's see, I'm tempted to make it so that it does a target of blank. What target blank does, if you're not familiar, if your HTML is a bit rusty, is it forces a link to open in a new tab. So if somebody wants to go to the help documentation, I kind of feel like I should open it up so they can do a side-by-side. Yeah, let's play with that for a minute, see how it looks. But before we do that, we can run our tests and prove that, yeah, the two tests are working. So if you're not authenticated, you're not going to see the one about the email and the email address. But if you are, then you will see it. So let's refresh. Yeah, that feels pretty good. So you're in the app. This is where you want to be. You've gone to get help, and you click this, and it launches the help documentation. And I specifically used the words help documentation because I knew that that's what I was putting over here too. So I want some symmetry there. to match up. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know, you all can tell me if I'm crazy, but I feel like this is enough right now to guide people of, they've got their two options. They can go read the documentation or they can contact support. So that feels right. Okay, so with that change, we've got the help link at the bottom. We've got a new help page with some tests to prove that this is not there. In fact, why don't we go, let's go look at it when we're logged out just to see what that looks like. It's going to be very short, but that's fine. Yeah. So people can go read stuff. And I don't expect a lot of people will want to come get help about School Desk unless they're logged in and a user. So that's probably okay. All right. And I'll leave this logged in for myself for the next time because it's useful. Let's go back to this item here and check out what's left. So we added this help link into the footer and added this new page. That's all good. There's one more piece of this. We need to add this to deployment. So the only reason that the help page has worked as we had it so far is that I had already built this stuff. In fact, let's go see what it looks like when I blow it up. So these are just generated files. So I can demolish this build directory, and that's totally fine. And then I can start up the web server and come back to the help area. And now when I click this link, the web server is not going to find it. And so we're actually, this is interesting that this is static content, but because it's a link that the middleware is linking, it actually runs through Django. So you get the Django debug page here. I didn't really expect that, but that's pretty cool. That won't happen in production because this page only appears when debug is set to true, as you can see here at the bottom. They tell you that. So it means that there's no content there. So if I deployed this right now and somebody went to the site and clicked the help link and clicked that help documentation button, it'd be broken because my deployment has no notion of it needs to build this stuff. So what we need to do is instruct the deployment process on building the actual documentation, which then will bundle together in one big Heroku bundle. And I'm going to search for the word bin for a reason because I think it's in one of my issues. Yeah. So the Heroku build packs, the systems that actually build Python projects, they have a couple of hook files that you can use. And you can see that I didn't end up using this for the Hugo stuff because that was all written in Go. And so I had to use a different build pack. But the Sphinx documentation is a Python tool. So what I need to do is run this Python tool within the Python build pack. And the way to do that, and I didn't give myself a link, which is annoying, but there is a Python Heroku build pack. So let's search for Heroku Python. And okay. And you can see here that there's a hooks directory. So there's this pre-compile and a post-compile. And I tried this once on a different part to see if I could get something running, but it turns out, as the name implies, I didn't really know what compile fully meant, like if it was literal compilation or what was put in place here for the Python build pack, because Python is not a compiled language. But it's referring to what packages are installed. So in order to actually use anything that you have installed from your requirements file, which is the case for running Sphinx, I think I'll have to use a post-compile script. So if we look at this, let's see. we look at the compile script. This is how Heroku is like building the application for deployment. And you can read through all the steps here of what it does, and it does the things that you'd expect. It installs files from pip or packages from pip and all of that stuff. Sure, that's in here somewhere. But one of the comments in here, yeah, here's where they get into the code. They're making some stuff. So it's like it's the guts of what Heroku is doing. So you definitely don't want to like focus on this a lot. But here's where it's relevant. And you can see this comment that says the precompile hook. Customers rely on this, don't remove it. And so it runs all this stuff before installing packages, as I said. So similarly to the precompile, there is a postcompile. And it says experimental, but frankly, if it's been here for as many years as it is, I'm pretty confident that we can rely on it. So what it's doing is it looks for, it looks to run this postcompile, which is going to look in my project for a postcompile file. That's the way I understand it anyway, because I think we can go to steps, hooks, and there's this postcompile there that's put 3 years ago, and it looks for if there's a postcompile file in my project, then it's going to give it the executable bit and run it in an environment. All right, so that's pretty long-winded to get at what I need to get at, but I think what that means is that in my repository, I have a bin directory. Oh, I already used the postcompile. Crazy. So we're just going to open that up then. I had forgotten I used it. Oh, yeah. This is what I used it for. Okay, well, we're not going to talk about the blog stuff. There's already a postcompile here. That's great news. So the second thing we need to run here is this is for, well, I'll put some comments in here. Compress all the blog files. This does like gzip. It creates gzip and broadly compressed versions of anything from my blog so that it'll serve them faster through the middleware. And so the other thing that we want to do, probably actually want to do two things. Because now that I'm seeing this, I want to also have my documentation compressed as well so that gets served quickly. So let's test this out. So let's do, let's make the documentation again. And if we look at the files in here, which are under docs, build HTML, you can see, boom, got some HTML files. But you notice here that this is reminding me that we want to compress the files there. So we can either try, I don't know if this will accept multiple directories. That's something we can check. There's a compress command that comes with white noise, which is not super discoverable, but it's there. And you can see it's telling us what to do. It says it's some extensions. So you can only specify one root. So we need to run this multiple times if we want to compress multiple directories, which we do. So I need to build the documentation first. That's the important part. But we did just build it over here. And so let's try this. Let's try Python M white noise compress, and then we want to give it the path to where this the output is. It's going to compress all these files as well. It takes a little bit of time. It's not the fastest thing in the world, but it doesn't have to be. Like I can be okay with my deployment taking an additional 30 seconds if it's going to mean that anybody who uses the help documentation gets a faster loading experience. So let's look at the effect of that. If we do an ls on here again, notice what else is in here now. So previously it was just the HTML file. Now we've got this .br file and .gz file. So what's going to happen is if somebody requests my documentation page and they're asking for the index, the white noise middleware that Django is running to serve static files, it's going to look for that file. But it's also going to look at the compression settings that the end user's browser says it can receive. And so if the end user's browser says it can receive gzip compression, which is basically all of them, all the browsers will do gzip these days, it'll send the gzipped version instead, because the gzipped version is smaller, and often a lot smaller. Let's see how much. Oh, hold on. Let's see if we can get some human readable sizes here. Yeah, here we go. So the index file is 5 kilobytes. The Brotli file, that's the BR extension, is a different, it's a slower compression algorithm, but it produces a tighter result, is 1.2 kilobytes, and gzip is 1.7. So if you're unfamiliar with why compression is a thing, here's what happens. It's faster for a browser to be given a compressed version and then run the decompression algorithm on the browser side and get the final file versus sending the full file over the internet because of latency. So this step that I'm taking of introducing this compression tells the white noise middleware to take advantage of that, to create these files, look at what a browser says it can receive, and then send back that version, because that version will be smaller and faster to send. And then the decompression happens on the user's browser side, and the user gets a better experience. So we definitely want the compression on those files, and I ran the right command a moment ago to do that. So we want to put this exact command into our our post-compile script here. So let's say compress all the documentation files. All right. But at this stage on Heroku, those files don't exist yet. So we actually need to have a step that says build all the docs. And that is going to be the same make command that we've been running, because Heroku should be able to run in the same, it's running from the same directory. So we can run make-c docs HTML. All right. So let's check it out. Let's check out the final result of what do we have in this area. Let's go ahead and add that all to the stage, and we'll check out what the GitHub stage has. So we've added some comments to the post compile. I forgot that it was even in there, so I'm sorry for walking you down that tangent, but I guess it was useful to learn anyway. And we're going to tell the Python build stage to build documentation as part of the process and compress whatever it finds on the other side. And then we've added some tests, a couple of tests to make sure that a support email is in there or not. So that's what these tests are. And then we are pointing our new URLs file to this help path. And then within our views area, we're pointing to a help template and adding the new variable, the support email, to the context of that so that it can be rendered. In our settings, we've added the documentation build directory. So that's where the middleware knows to look for those files. We tested that out and proved that it worked from Django's point of view. And we've added this new setting that actually includes the email. And then have updated the footer to include the new help URL. And finally, we've got our help template here that says help. Actually, let's change that. Let's change that to match up with the header. So let's go to the help template, and instead of saying just help, because I added getting help in, so this will be the title that goes in the tab. So we'll say getting help, and then that will match up with the header that we put in there. So that's it. And hopefully all this passes. And what we'll do is say add documentation to the site, which fixes number 267, right? That was the number. Pretty sure it was. And we just added that to deployment as well. So let's close this. We're going to push this up, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll test it out. We'll do a deployment. See, I want to have a final confident test to make sure everything works, and we'll check it out, and we'll go poke the actual site, which is living at a Heroku domain that's accessible. So, and I can talk through what's going on at these various stages. So there are 3 build packs in Heroku that are running. This first one is the Node.js build pack, and the only reason all of this stuff exists is for this file right here. We're building the CSS file from Tailwind, and instead of shipping a 2 megabyte file, we're compressing it down by looking for what CSS is used versus not used. And so that's what that stage is doing. So it's saying here that that stage, that Heroku build pack succeeded, and it's moving on to the next one. It's saying now we've found a Hugo app, and we've got a Go, or there's a Hugo app detected because we're using a Hugo specific build pack, and that build pack is building the product blog, the blog that says here are all the features that are coming out. That goes super quick because Hugo is amazing and built all the content in very little time. And then it moves on to the Python stuff. So we've got all of our packages. It's got to install new ones because I made a change, and it noticed that my requirements changed. The difference is that now I'm installing all of the Sphinx packages too. So that's what it's doing. It's collecting all of this stuff and building it all together. And now it's running the post-compile hook here to compress all of those files. That was for the blog. And then it's running the next command, which is starting here. Or I guess technically starting at that make command. So it's going into the docs directory, running Sphinx, and generating all of the Sphinx files, so the documentation. And then finally you can see the compression command. So make ends right there. And then the very next line shows that it's doing compression of all the files that it's discovering in the documentation area. And right now it is putting all that together, and it's getting quite large. It's 151 megabytes. I don't know why it's that big. I guess it's a lot of Python requirements in code now. And the last thing it does before it launches the app is it tries to run the migrate command. So if I had any data migrations to do, then it would run that. So it tells you we're done with this, but we're not going to actually do this until we've run the release command, which is the very last thing. And you can see that it tried to run the migrations command, and it says, oops, there's no migrations to run, so we're done. All right, so that's what my deployment does. Hopefully that made sense to you. If you have questions about it, please ask in the chat. So let's go check out the site. So we can call Heroku open, which will should launch the application already primed and ready to go because we just deployed it. So even though I'm on the free tier, it would normally sleep if it were there, but since we just did a deploy, it doesn't need to do that. And we can come down to the bottom and click on help. And I'm logged in as a user, so I can see this. But I'm really more interested on, is the documentation working? Documentation fires up in a new tab. Pretty cool. And we can click around, and there's nothing really here yet because I haven't written the content. That's important. But the framework is in place to have documentation. So what I like about this is my documentation and my blog now both live at paths that are on my domain. And Sleepy Caverns is just the Heroku generated name. Ultimately, as you just saw, this will be theschooldesk.app, and my blog and docs will live on that domain. By living on a single domain, any SEO benefit I might get from links from other users, like assuming I have customers at some point in the future and they share documentation pages with others, whatever. The fact that it's on this domain will help SEO for that domain and that domain only. If I had a docs subdomain and a blog subdomain and a www subdomain for the actual application and had the 3 different subdomains, then each of them would get their own SEO at their own pace, which doesn't help in the long term. So it benefits me to put it all in a single place. Okay, so I think that about wraps us up for the evening. Let's talk through what's coming up next before you go. And so you can, if you want to tune in the future, you can see what kind of work we're going to do. So this is the kind of stuff that sort of the phase that I'm in. It's a bit of a polishing phase for the time being. But as I mentioned, my spouse, who's going to be my first customer, will be starting school early next year. So I imagine that the flow of things to change about the application will increase as she goes through the app and says, hey, you know what? This week view that shows all of my tasks is not working for me in XYZ kind of ways. And we will do our best to keep up with that pace of feedback. Hopefully it's not too much feedback. I mean, I did put quite a bit of thought into preparing it, but things have to change. When we're not doing that and working on that feedback, I do have other just like general things about the product that I want to change that I think are going to help, maybe not my spouse right at first for this school year, but things that are going to be beneficial for future school years and enrollment and ways to like optimize the flow for the application. So that's one thing I want to do is actually improve some of that flow stuff. I'm going to get the domain hooked up. I don't know that that's going to be an activity that I do on stream. I think there's probably not enough to do there to merit it. But I can keep you posted on what happens with that. And then finally, my other big thing is that I need to really get in there before I get a lot of users is I'd like to get some kind of system that will provide I don't know if this is the right term for this, or it's not really a viral loop. It's more like a viral hook is the idea, but essentially give people some incentive to want to share School Desk with others in their community. Like, I don't have a big marketing budget for this. There's no plan to like go out and do a big ad spend on Facebook or something like that. What I really think is going to help this product succeed is a couple things. It needs to be a good product and it needs to work well. So that is where my first customer, my spouse, can help polish that and make sure that it works for actual users. But the second thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be an ability for a small group of people to start to multiply by giving them tools to share it with others. So I have an idea for my system to incentivize inviting other users to try out and sign up for School Desk. Essentially, the service will be a paid service, like people will have to pay for it ultimately. And I want to be able to offer some amount of discount to folks who are paying for their next school year if they can invite their friend and that friend signs up to use School Desk as well. Because I mean, the math is not very hard. If the product is say $50-$60 a year, I don't really know yet. It's not a high margin kind of service because homeschool families are pretty cost conscious, which I knew going in. But let's say, let's just kind of keep the math easy and say $50. So $50 a year. If I can have people give them like $10 off if they have one of their friends sign up and actually commit for a year as well. So in total, I've gained what that person will end up spending. If they get $10 off of $50, they'll spend $40. The other person will be spending $50. So I come out ahead, and that person gets a bit of a discount on their product. So I think that that's going to be a valuable system for helping the growth of the product, especially as people are cost conscious and would like to save money. And a lot of these homeschool families, they talk to each other and have communities. So I think it'll be a good viral way to grow. But I need to have that whole invitation system in place. I need to have it worked out. I need to figure out how to create the right coupons and the right tracking for all of that to make sure that I can honor those requests as they come in. So that'll be kind of, aside from any functionality changes that are there, that's going to be the next sort of focus on how to actually get people to use the site once I start bringing in beta users and getting more feedback. So that's my plan. Hopefully that sounds interesting to you. If you have any questions about it, again, I'm on Twitter as MB Layman. I do post all this content up to YouTube, so you can go check it out later. There's a Discord below, so if you want to chat about this there, happy to discuss it there. I'm pretty excited about where School Desk will be going as a real app in 2021. We're staring at the very end of 2020 here. This is December 30th when we're recording. So I think it's going to be exciting that we have the kernel of the application, the core of it ready, and it's time to move on to the next thing, which is pretty cool. So thanks again for tuning in. I will get content up on YouTube if you want to go refer back to anything else, and I appreciate you joining in. So take care and have a good night.